Hey guys, tonight we're heading to a place of whispering markets, flickering lanterns, and baskets overflowing with pomegranates still warm from the Persian sun. You're in a city of marble courtyards and spice-laced breezes, somewhere between myth and memory. The scent of rosewater clings to the air like perfume to silk, and every corner of the bazaar hums with the promise of pleasure, or at least a very confusing herbal tea. You've wandered into ancient Persia, that shimmering crossroad of sensuality, empire, and utterly baffling love recipes. And yes, we are here for the aphrodisiacs. But fair warning, some of these seductive concoctions might charm your beloved, or might just give you hallucinations and permanent goosebumps. You probably won't survive this as a date night. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from, and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're walking through the market of Isfahan at twilight. It's a warm evening, the kind that makes your robe stick gently to your skin, and the stall keepers are calling out their wares with the practiced sing-song of those who know exactly how much flirtation fits into a pomegranate sale. A sprig of mint behind one ear, you stop to admire a bowl of crushed pistachios glinting like emerald dust in the fading light. The woman behind the stall leans forward. "For desire," she whispers, "good with dates and vinegar." You raise an eyebrow. She winks. "Also good for chicken stew, but especially for love." In ancient Persia, food and passion weren't just related. They were practically dating. Aphrodisiacs were not hidden away in secret cupboards or awkward health shops. They were part of daily life, folded into recipes, poems, rituals, and gossip. And one of the most popular, most celebrated, and most Instagrammable, if Instagram had existed, was the pomegranate. You slice one open now, its seeds glistening like rubies in the lamplight. Sweet, tart, and just the right amount of juicy to make a mess of your sleeves. In the Zoroastrian worldview, which shaped much of Persian moral and spiritual life, pomegranates symbolize fertility, prosperity, and the cosmic balance between the sweet and the sour, a lot like marriage. Historians still argue whether pomegranates were genuinely considered aphrodisiacs or simply beloved for their symbolism and seasonal abundance. But poetry from the era is not shy. The 14th century mystic poet Hafiz, writing under the stars of Shiraz, compared the lips of lovers to split pomegranate skins. And more than one Sufi metaphor goes uncomfortably far in its admiration for fruit anatomy. You wander past the stall, the juice staining your fingers, and follow your nose towards something more savory. A nearby tent has steam curling up through holes in the canvas, and a small man with a walnut face is stirring a pot large enough to bathe in. "Lamb with cinnamon," he says, offering you a spoon. You sip politely. It's rich, spiced, and laced with what tastes suspiciously like honey and garlic, another famous pairing in the aphrodisiac canon. Garlic, of course, is still divisive. Ancient Persian texts often treated it like a holy root, but modern breath might disagree. According to one surviving text, a pre-battle stew involving garlic and fenugreek was meant to stir courage and flood the loins with fire. That's a direct translation. Someone got very carried away. Your vendor gives a knowing look and adds, "Add pistachio and no one leaves your bed." Or your bathroom, possibly. Pistachios, figs, and saffron were staples of both cuisine and courtship, and the theory behind many Persian aphrodisiacs leaned into humorously sound logic. If a food looked like a body part, it helped that part. Figs were blush-worthy for obvious reasons, and pistachios, with their gently split shells, were described in one recipe scroll as the key to both hunger and love. Meanwhile, saffron, bright, expensive, and hard to harvest, was the Beyoncé of Persian spices. It tinted everything from stews to love tonics, and its aroma was believed to call the heart from the shadows, which is poetic or ominous. But even among these romantic ingredients, the idea of aphrodisiacs wasn't just about physical desire. It was tied to health, energy, the balance of the body's four humors, and the harmony between hot and cold elements in food. A passionate night, you see, required not just spark, but proper thermal calibration. Heaven forbid you eat too many cold cucumbers before attempting seduction. You wipe your hands on your sash and keep moving, pausing by a booth where a pair of giggling teenagers are grinding dried rose petals into powder. It goes in sherbet, they explain, then dissolve into laughter. You're not sure if they mean the drink or a euphemism. In Persia, who knows? Rose, along with musk and ambergris, was a scent of seduction, dabbed behind ears or brewed into tea. One noblewoman reportedly carried a locket of pressed rose in hair to remind her of her first husband. He made better stews, she allegedly confessed later, but worse decisions. And if you're wondering whether these recipes actually worked, well, that depends on how you define work. Did they inspire love, lust, diarrhea? Historians still argue whether the ingredients themselves mattered or if it was the ritual, the simmering, the scent, the anticipation that made the difference. You bite into a fig. It's overripe. Everything about this moment feels overripe. A perfect place to end our first taste of Persian passion. You've barely made it down the next alleyway when the scent hits you. A swirl of something buttery, floral, and deeply suspicious. It's the kind of smell that makes you pause mid-step and wonder if you've just walked into someone's romantic dinner or the inside of an alchemist's pocket. You peer through a curtain of tiny bronze beads and step into a tiled kitchen glowing with lamplight. The floors are polished, the counters are stone, and the air is warm with steam and spice. A cook, round-bellied and humming to himself, stirs a bubbling pot with one hand while grinding something that looks like dried bark with the other. He doesn't look up. You clear your throat. Salam? Without missing a beat, he points to a low stool and says, "Sit. You're early, but that's all right. We're testing the rosewater blend." You sit cautiously as he lifts the lid on the pot. "Goat brains," he says cheerfully. "Fresh ones, soft and silky. You'll love them." You will not. But you're already here, and the tile is warm beneath your feet, and your curiosity, as always, betrays you. He ladles a portion into a shallow bowl and places it before you with reverence. "With cinnamon, rosewater, and a hint of cardamom," he adds. "Very good for the nerves." And the evening spirit. In ancient Persia, food wasn't just sustenance. It was medicine. It was metaphor. It was a subtle language of seduction, mood regulation, and spiritual alignment. In the kitchens of poets and princes alike, aphrodisiacs weren't whispered secrets. They were household staples. Rosewater, goat brains, pounded almonds, ground poppy seeds, and more. Romantic meals could be earthy, elaborate, or downright alarming. You stare into the bowl. The goat brain has the unsettling texture of melting tofu and the shine of something that once had an IQ. The rosewater scent dances on top, deceptively elegant. You take a small spoonful, close your eyes, and brace yourself. It's warm, creamy, surprisingly mild. The cardamom cuts through the heaviness like a polite guest excusing themselves. And then there's the aftertaste. Something floral, something ancient, something vaguely like soap in memory. Historians still argue, the cook says casually, whether rosewater actually had any aphrodisiac properties, or if it just made people smell less like anxiety. You nod solemnly. That tracks. He sits down beside you with a jug of something cloudy. "Drink," he says, "a digestive, made with vinegar, mint, crushed walnuts, and a whisper of garlic." You sip it. It tastes like someone dared to make a salad dressing into a love potion. This, he tells you, is an ancient recipe found in the writings of Avicenna, one of the great physicians of the Islamic Golden Age. His canon of medicine includes numerous entries on foods that warm the body, ignite passion, and enhance the movement of the humors. Avicenna believed the body was a balance of hot, cold, wet, and dry, and romance, like digestion, required the right ratio of all four. Fall out of balance, and you could end up too cold to care, or too hot to be polite. You're still processing this when the cook brings out the next course. Dates, stuffed with ground sesame and dipped in honey, then sprinkled with crushed pistachios. They're served warm, on a silver tray shaped like a crescent moon. "The sweetener of lovers," he murmurs. Pistachios were prized for their oily richness and subtle sweetness. They were thought to replenish vital energy, ease stress, and quite frankly, make your breath smell better than garlic ever could. Combined with sesame and honey, these sticky bites were considered not only delicious, but gently stimulating. Quirky tidbit time. In some parts of medieval Persia, lovers would exchange a single pistachio as a secret symbol of affection. In one tale, a noblewoman sent a pistachio carved with a tiny rose to her suitor. He reportedly fainted from joy or hunger, It's unclear. And of course, no meal in ancient Persia was complete without poetry. While you nibble your date, the cook recites a few lines from Hafiz. I wish I could show you when you are lonely or in darkness the astonishing light of your own being. He pauses, then adds, Hafiz also said wine and love were both best enjoyed barefoot and with abandon. You nod, trying not to get date paste on your shirt. Then comes the kicker, a story from The Erotic Spirit Through History by Peter Webb. A 10th century Persian noble, infatuated with a much younger poet, supposedly commissioned a meal composed entirely of long, soft, and warming foods. The menu? Braised eggplant, saffroned rice, cucumber soup, honeyed carrots, and almond milk. When the poet declined his affections, the noble dramatically flung himself into a fountain, claiming the cucumbers had lied to him. Some historians believe the tale was a satire of courtly excess. Others insist it's entirely true. Love, the cook sighs, is a dangerous appetite. He brings out one final item, a small clay dish of something pale pink and jiggling slightly. It looks like custard, but he says it's made from yogurt, crushed poppy seeds, and dried rose petals. Eat before bed, he advises. It gives you beautiful dreams. Sometimes. You take a bite. It tastes like sleep dressed in silk. As the candlelight flickers and the smells of cinnamon mingle in the air, you lean back against the tiled wall and feel yourself slowly floating. Warmed, scented, slightly disoriented, and just maybe a little bit charmed. The kitchen fades around you like the end of a dream. Outside, the alley buzzes with distant laughter, a cart clattering by, and the low hum of a city in love with itself. Your goat brain journey has ended, and you're still alive, possibly seduced, definitely sleepy. The next morning. Though let's be honest, you don't really know if it's morning or late afternoon because time has started to feel pleasantly irrelevant. You follow the scent of dried citrus peels and something that smells suspiciously like regret. The alley you're in is quieter now, shaded by hanging rugs and grapevines creeping over wooden beams. You pass a boy selling pickled walnuts, a woman grinding turmeric, and finally, a stern-looking man perched beside a chest full of scrolls. He's dressed in faded blue robes, his beard neatly combed, and his table is covered in bottles. No labels, just glass flasks, little clay bowls, and a thin copper spoon that looks like it knows things. Physician, someone whispers behind you. Careful. You, of course, walk straight up to him. He glances at you once, then gestures toward a small wooden chair. You don't look like you have a fever, he says. But perhaps your heart has forgotten how to beat with conviction? You blink. I think it's still beating, just very slowly. He smiles. We'll fix that. He lifts the lid on a small box. Inside, dried herbs, bark, 3 rosebuds, and a cluster of greenish-black seeds. You recognize exactly none of it. This, he says, plucking up a single wrinkled pod, is called nishian. In some parts of the eastern provinces, it's known as the whisper seed. Mixed with wine and pounded fig, it becomes a love draught, not for the faint of stomach. You nod politely. You've had worse. He begins preparing it while explaining how ancient Persian medicine approached desire. It wasn't just hormones, it was about bodily fluids, energy flow, and internal heat. A person lacking passion might be too cold, too damp, or afflicted by excessive melancholy. A good aphrodisiac didn't just stimulate, it rebalanced, recentered. Sometimes it knocked you unconscious, but that was just a bonus. He pours a bit of crushed nishian into wine, adds chopped figs, muddles in cloves, then lets it steep while heating a small copper dish over an open flame. You'll want to sip slowly, he advises. It might cause vivid memories of people you've never met. Quirky detail alert. Certain aphrodisiacs in Persia were believed to enhance not just lust, but imagination. That is, they made you better at fantasizing. One courtly document from the 11th century even refers to dream friends, imagined lovers conjured during post-dinner rest, sometimes assisted by tonics like this one. You take a sip. The taste is, how to put this, complex. There's sweetness from the fig, bitterness from the bark, and a peppery bite that lands somewhere behind your eyes. For a moment you're positive you remember a past life where you owned 6 camels and had opinions about astronomy. The physician watches with mild interest. Historians still argue whether the effects of such potions were psychosomatic or genuinely pharmacological, he says. But the mind is easily led by suggestion, especially when wine is involved. You agree, or try to. Your tongue has gone a little numb. He hands you a second scroll. This one's more dangerous, he warns. Not the potion, the story. You unroll it carefully. The parchment crackles, the ink faded. It's a love story from the court of Shah Ismail I, founder of the Safavid dynasty. According to legend, he fell deeply, absurdly, in love with a merchant's son after sharing a meal of saffron rice, roasted duck, and a dessert known simply as the tongue of bliss. No one knows exactly what was in it, but descriptions suggest crushed almonds, jasmine syrup, and some form of opiate. Their romance lasted 3 months, caused an uproar among the clergy, and inspired a dozen poems. One of which ends with, "He who dined on the tongue of bliss spoke no lies and kissed only truth." You pause. That's weirdly beautiful. The physician shrugs. Whether it happened or not, it's written down. That makes it real enough. He prepares a second potion, this time thicker and less aromatic. This one, he says, is less about love and more about power. The ability to resist fatigue, to impress your partner with stamina, or at least make it through one more dance before passing out. He hands you a spoon. You hesitate. It tastes like moss, vinegar, and poor decisions. He chuckles. Walnut oil, powdered licorice, and ox bile, not recommended for dinner parties. Still, you feel oddly awake. Your toes tingle. Many love potions of this period straddle the line between aphrodisiac and poison, he continues. The difference, as always, is dosage. You suddenly feel extremely aware of your dosage. Fun fact, one Persian text includes an antidote section at the end of its aphrodisiac recipes, just in case things got too hot too fast. The cooling agent, yogurt with mint and a crushed pearl if available. You're not sure if the pearl is symbolic or crunchy. Love is always an experiment, the physician mutters. Some ingredients will burn, others will bloom. You thank him, stand, wobble a little, and exit the shaded alley with a renewed appreciation for pharmaceutical romance. Back in the sunlight, the world feels a touch brighter. Or maybe it's the fig wine talking. Either way, you're now one aphrodisiac richer and approximately one liver weaker. Next time, maybe just send a love letter. The sun has begun to dip, casting long shadows through lattice windows and washing the stone streets in amber. You find yourself summoned, quite literally, by the sound of silk slippers and a rustling curtain. A servant in blue gestures for you to follow. You do. Because of course you do. You've tried goat brains and fig wine. What's the worst that could happen? She leads you through a private courtyard, scented with orange blossom, and up a narrow staircase into what can only be described as a palace dining chamber dipped in gold. Candles flicker in mirrored alcoves, and silk drapes ripple in the breeze like the sighs of bored nobility. You're seated at a low table, a single cushion, and across from you sits the Shah, or at least someone who very much wants to be remembered as such. He's dressed in embroidered velvet, wears rings on every finger, and regards you with the pleased smile of someone about to serve you something illegal. This, he says, motioning to the feast before you, is a meal of influence. You nod politely. You've heard that before, usually right before the stomach cramps start. The table is arranged with staggering precision, rose lamb skewers, honeyed pistachio pastries, bowls of pomegranate molasses, trays of quail eggs dusted with gold. And in the center, a dish you've never seen, something gelatinous, shimmering, and deep red, served cold. The Shah claps his hands. Try it, that's the one. You do. It's not unpleasant. Sweet, cool, with a strangely peppery finish. You detect cinnamon, perhaps pomegranate, possibly oyster. Maybe something you really hope wasn't oyster. It tingles on the way down. Love jelly, he says. A family recipe, improves clarity of affection, also increases efficiency. You don't ask what kind of efficiency he means. According to Persian court customs during the Safavid and Qajar periods, rulers often hosted highly ceremonial dinners, not just to impress ambassadors or nobles, but to seduce or intimidate potential lovers. Every course, every scent, every bit of table choreography was calibrated to signal power, wealth, and subtle romantic invitation. Historians still argue, the Shah says between bites, whether these rituals were truly about intimacy or just politics wearing a silk robe. He leans forward. I say, why not both? He serves you a boiled pear soaked in wine and sprinkled with crushed saffron threads. It glistens like a jewel on your plate. Pear for the lips, he says, saffron for the soul. You chew slowly, unsure if you're being seduced or drugged. A servant glides in with a jar of thick greenish paste and sets it between you. The Shah beams. Aha! The real prize. He gestures for you to take some. You scoop a bit onto flatbread. The texture is not friendly. Wild-ass marrow, he says cheerfully, boiled with fenugreek, date syrup, and nutmeg. It fuels vitality, and in some parts of Khuzestan, it's believed to let the soul speak through the skin. You consider the concept of your soul suddenly bursting forth through your pores like an emotionally unstable rash. Still, you chew. It tastes surprisingly earthy, like smoky raisins and ambition. He pours wine spiced with cinnamon, black pepper, and something that numbs the tip of your tongue. Possibly love. Possibly anesthesia. Fun anecdote. Eleanor Herman's Sex with Kings recounts a Persian Shah who believed in nightly rotating aphrodisiac menus. Monday was almond and chickpea stew. Tuesday, cinnamon glazed eggplant. Wednesday, quail in pomegranate sauce. By Friday, he was eating dishes involving deer hearts and occasionally oyster-scented rose milk. The exact outcomes are lost to history. But one poem suggests his lovers often needed naps. A dancer appears, dressed in veils, performing a slow, hypnotic movement across the room. Every gesture is deliberate, designed to echo the sensuality of the meal, the scent of the lamps, the slow tension building like the spice on your tongue. The Shah speaks without looking away. They say the right food can make a person fall in love with whoever sits across from them, or at least with the meal itself. He tears a flatbread and passes it to you. That's the danger of seduction, isn't it? Sometimes it's just hunger. You're not sure if he's flirting or philosophizing, possibly both. And now, dessert, rose sherbet, chilled in a block of ice brought down from the mountains, laced with jasmine syrup and powdered saffron. You take a sip. The cold stings your teeth, but the sweetness is soft and lush, like the end of a dream you're trying to remember. Across the table, the Shah is nodding off slightly. And you're dizzy, perfumed, overfed, and floating several inches above your cushion. Everything smells like cinnamon and velvet. You've survived the Shah's secret feast, possibly fallen in love with a bowl of rice, possibly become part of a diplomatic seduction strategy. Time will tell. One thing's certain, that jelly is working. You stumble out of the palace sometime later, full, flushed, and feeling like you just dreamt an entire cooking show hosted by a king who believes in edible emotions. The night air hits you like a poem, cool, slightly damp, and tinged with the scent of blooming jasmine. It's a welcome contrast to the velveted humidity of the Shah's dining room. But there's no time for digestion or reflection, because a merchant with a leopard print headscarf is waving at you with the urgency of someone who knows a lot about weird animals and wants to share. You, she shouts, her voice somewhere between a command and a lullaby. You look like someone in need of confidence. That could mean anything. But she's already pulling you toward a narrow stall stacked high with clay jars, scrolls tied in string, and bundles of dried something. At the very top, hanging like a badge of honor, a preserved femur. Possibly human, hopefully not. Come, she says, brushing herbs off a bench. Let me tell you about the marrow of the wild ass. You sit. Of course you sit. According to her, in possibly half the province, wild ass marrow, when roasted with crushed dates, turmeric, and a hint of cinnamon, was the ancient Persian answer to modern performance anxiety. 1 teaspoon, she claims, and your beloved will think you're blessed by the gods of thunder. You try not to laugh, but she's completely serious. She begins scooping a dark brown paste into a bronze bowl. You eat this with honey cakes, she says. Best taken before sundown. Works better with warm wine. You ask the obvious. Have you tried it? She cackles. Darling, I sell it. I don't need it. She hands you a slice of spongy honey cake, still warm from a nearby stove. You spread the paste. It's gritty, sticky. Smells faintly like burnt raisins and bravery. First bite, sweet, then spicy. Then a bizarre back of the throat tingling that suggests it might double as varnish. But hey, you're still upright, and the stars are getting prettier. Historians still argue, she says thoughtfully, whether these animal-based aphrodisiacs were symbolic, like absorbing the strength and spirit of a wild creature, or if people genuinely thought marrow had biochemical effects. There's also the issue of class. Nobles could afford to experiment with elaborate ingredients, wild animals, imported spices, preserved fruits, while commoners might rely on garlic, nuts, and strong tea. But the desire? That was universal. She opens a scroll and reads aloud a recipe from the Sasanian era involving roasted lamb hearts stuffed with mint and crushed walnuts, to be served with saffroned rice and consumed with direct eye contact, she says. Very important. Quirky fringe fact. In one village along the eastern Persian border, it was traditional for newlyweds to eat a dish called dele ashik, lover's heart, on their wedding night. The dish included lamb heart, rose petals, honey, and a spice blend that allegedly caused lucid dreams. Whether the dreams were romantic or deeply unsettling depended on the cook. Back in the stall, the merchant begins pouring a thick syrup from a jar labeled simply "Do Not Spill." You ask what's in it. Figs, crushed poppy, cinnamon oil, vinegar, and goat bile, she says casually. Good for fertility, bad for carpets. You politely decline. Instead, she offers a dried fruit platter meant to encourage softness in spirit and firmness elsewhere. It's a medley of apricots, tamarind, and candied quince. Safe, comforting, mostly edible. As you chew, she shares a story from the erotic spirit through history, a poem by a Persian courtier whose lover sent him dried figs wrapped in silk, each fig stitched with a single word. Together, they formed a secret message: meet me under the pomegranate tree, bring no clothes. Subtlety was not a strong point. The merchant sighs. Ah, those were the days when people wrote poetry instead of sending goat emojis. You thank her, leave a small coin, and step back into the cool of the night. Your mouth is tingling slightly, possibly from cinnamon, possibly from the marrow, hard to say. Down the street, you pass another vendor shouting, "Love seeds, 3 for a dinar," and another roasting walnuts while humming an old lullaby about stolen kisses and almond oil. Everywhere you turn, food and flirtation blur into each other like watercolor. You pass a couple sharing a dish of saffron custard under an awning, a child selling candied rose petals, and a musician playing a slow, longing tune on a reed flute. A dog trots by with a string of dried figs in its mouth, possibly in love. You lean against a wall, your stomach full of cake and questionable confidence paste, and wonder how anyone ever survived a date in ancient Persia without accidentally summoning a deity or vomiting saffron. And yet you feel good, buzzed maybe, or enchanted. The stars swirl, the air tastes like honey and old songs. You survived the wild ass, you ate the paste, you didn't die. Honestly, that's romance. The next morning, or let's be real, some indistinct liminal hour when the moon refuses to go home and the sun hasn't RSVP'd yet, you find yourself in the quietest part of the city. The noise of markets and meat vendors is behind you, replaced by the steady drip of a garden fountain and the faint rustle of linen robes against marble floors. You've entered the scholar's quarter. This is the place where ideas sleep with scrolls, where poetry flirts with philosophy, and where the only thing stronger than the mint tea is the collective disapproval of your footwear. You're ushered into a dim library smelling of parchment, incense, and dry wit. Your guide, a narrow-faced scribe with eyebrows that seem to move independently, nods once and disappears into the stacks. You're left alone with a desk, a cup of something hot, and an unfurled scroll titled Nuskat Eshk, Formulas for Love. The calligraphy is elegant, the drawings less so. On one page, a poorly rendered couple appears to be dancing. On another, what may be a date fruit is labeled Agent of Eruption. That can't be right. But the annotations in the margin, messier, livelier, done by a different hand, hint at something far more interesting. You begin reading. One recipe involves saffron, clove, pounded apricot kernel, and a curious instruction. Apply to chest with firm intent. Wait until moon passes second gate. You're unsure what that means. You're also unsure why it's illustrated with a goat standing on a rooftop. But this is ancient Persian love literature, and the line between recipe, ritual, and cosmic instruction was always pleasantly blurry. For scholars of the 9th to 13th centuries, Aphrodisiac knowledge lived at the intersection of medicine, astrology, poetry, and dare you to try it experimentation. A famous manuscript from the era includes a so-called saffron seduction cycle, a 5-night progression of meals and ointments said to align the body with Venus's movement across the night sky. It begins with rice, ends with roses, and includes a bath in milk and fig leaves. There's also mention of goat song. No clarification. Historians still argue whether this was ever actually practiced or was more of a spiritual metaphor. But then again, who's to say where metaphor ends and date night begins? As you trace your fingers across the worn parchment, you come across something delightful. An annotated list titled Things That Should Be Rubbed with Saffron Before Love. 1. Ankles. 2. Eyelids. 3 ears. The underside of the wrist. 5. The phrase, I am not mad, only enchanted. This one is circled 3 times. You're still giggling softly when the librarian returns. He looks over your shoulder, snorts, and says, That one. Yes, it caused a minor scandal in Shiraz. Someone rubbed saffron on a goat, thinking it was poetic. He pours you a glass of sweet tea. Let me show you something rarer. He disappears again and returns with a scroll far older, written in a script you don't recognize but helpfully translated in ink below. It's a list of rituals, love enhancement practices used by Zoroastrian priests, particularly during the spring festival of Nowruz. One passage reads, Before the dawn, let the lovers sip of the bitter apple boiled with honey and white pepper. Then they are to whisper the name of their beloved into a mirror until the breath leaves fog. You blink. A romantic potion and a mirror ritual? This is starting to feel very Pinterest board meets sorcery. And yet these kinds of ideas, mixing sensuality with ritual, passion with the divine, were common in Persian thought. Love wasn't just chemistry, it was cosmology, a way of ordering the universe. Peter Webb, in The Erotic Spirit Through History, suggests that Persian texts often frame intimacy as both personal fulfillment and a microcosm of divine union. In other words, seducing your beloved correctly was a form of prayer, possibly also a group project. Quirky side note, one 12th century poem describes a failed love potion that turned the drinker's voice into a songbird trill for 7 days. They used the wrong herb, probably nightshade. Possibly hilarious, possibly tragic. You lean back in your chair, heart full of herbs, head full of romance math, and try to imagine what it must have felt like to believe a pinch of saffron and a well-timed sigh could unlock someone's affection. The scribe hands you a final scroll. This one's shorter, handwritten, probably a copy of something once whispered by candlelight. If you wish to warm the soul of your beloved, it says, place a petal of rose beneath their tongue while they sleep. When they wake, speak nothing, but offer them dried apricot with your left hand. You're speechless. Is it real? Does it work? Was it just a prank played on some poor soul centuries ago? Historians still argue, naturally. But something in the softness of the instruction, the gentleness of its symbols, stays with you. You leave the library just as the first rays of dawn creep over the garden walls. Your fingers smell like saffron. Your mouth tastes faintly of sweet tea and unread poetry. You haven't fallen in love, but you've definitely fallen into something. And that scroll, you slip a copy into your sleeve. For academic reasons, obviously. You've barely crossed the threshold of the scholar's quarter before you're ambushed by a wave of street scent that practically slaps you awake, roasting nuts, fresh bread, and something distinctly unsettling. It's coming from a food stall shaped like a miniature fortress, banners fluttering, bronze bells chiming softly. A young man in a white tunic waves you over with the gusto of someone who doesn't understand what he's selling. Come, he shouts, a delicacy for love and bravery. Always a dangerous combination. You approach warily. On the counter sits a platter wrapped in fig leaves, steaming slightly. The man unwraps it to reveal a sight that makes your stomach lurch. What looks like a pair of, yes, pickled testicles. Lamb, hopefully. Maybe goat, unconfirmed. For virility, he says proudly, with pears and cumin, very powerful. You're not entirely sure what to say to that. In ancient Persian food lore, there was a persistent belief in like cures like, or in this case, eat the organ, strengthen the organ. This sympathetic magic extended beyond just testicles, brains for wit, hearts for courage, kidneys for endurance, and of course, the occasional mystery meat for inspiration. The vendor adds, we boil them in date syrup and serve with sliced pear. The sweetness helps distract. You nod, eyes fixed on the steaming pear slices. You take one. It's soft, perfumed, delicious. You bravely nibble at a corner of the main attraction. It tastes fine, like spiced sausage wrapped in personal regret. Historians still argue, he adds, whether such meals were actually consumed in romantic contexts or reserved for premarital rites, fertility ceremonies, or jokes that got wildly out of hand. You wouldn't be surprised if it were all three. Nearby, a matronly woman is preparing a large pot of barley stew and watching your ordeal with barely concealed amusement. She waves you over, plops down a bowl, and says, "Try this instead." You'll still be strong, but you won't question your life choices. The stew is hearty: barley, lentils, leeks, turmeric, and a dollop of yogurt on top. Comfort food, the kind meant to settle both stomach and spirit. She ladles out another bowl, this time with a swirl of pomegranate molasses and a dusting of dried mint. "This," she says, "we give to newlyweds, not for desire, for digestion." You nod, grateful. Sometimes passion needs a break. But then she opens a small tin and sprinkles in something dark and oily. "Black seed," she explains. "The prophet said it cures everything but death, especially in bed." You almost choke on your stew. She laughs and tells you a story passed down in her family. Her great-grandmother, newly married and extremely nervous, was given a jar of honey mixed with black seed, crushed almonds, and saffron by her mother-in-law. She was told to eat a spoonful every night before bed. Apparently, she had 8 children and a habit of giggling in her sleep. Was it the recipe, you ask? She shrugs. Or the giggling. Either way, something worked. There's a quiet poetry to this moment. 2 people sharing stew and stories, surrounded by spice jars, ladles, and the buzz of a waking street. No potions, no pressure, just food with memory. Then a boy runs by carrying a basket of pomegranates and shouting something about a tiger root. You follow. The boy leads you to a man selling dried herbs and obscure vegetables. He's hunched, eyes sharp, hands always moving. When you ask about tiger root, he grins and pulls out something that looks like a wrinkled carrot wearing armor. "This," he says, "is not for amateurs." He shaves off a slice, drops it into a boiling pan of honey and vinegar, and lets it reduce until it's a thick amber paste. He scoops some onto a spoon and offers it to you with the air of someone who has seen this go badly before. You take it. It's hot, sharp, deep, like chewing on ambition soaked in sugar. Your pulse actually skips. "This," he says, "makes you see stars." He doesn't elaborate. Peter Webb notes in The Erotic Spirit Through History that root-based aphrodisiacs, mandrake, tiger root, wild ginseng, were often treated with both reverence and suspicion. Some were known to cause euphoria, others, hallucinations. One Persian tale tells of a woman who accidentally boiled too much mandrake into her wedding feast and spent the reception speaking fluent owl. Quirky fringe fact: there's an entire chapter in a forgotten 15th century recipe scroll dedicated to foods that encourage longing but not haste. Tiger root appears 3 times. So does something called echo leaf, which was apparently to be eaten only while listening to music. You wipe your mouth, the heat from the root still humming in your cheeks. The vendor nods solemnly. "Too much," he says, "and your soul leaves early." Cool. Back on the main street, you pass a young couple holding hands and sharing a single fig stuffed with almond paste and dipped in rose honey. They take turns feeding each other small bites. Their laughter is quiet, easy. No spells, no testicles, just sweetness and time. You're starting to suspect that maybe the best aphrodisiac in ancient Persia wasn't something found in a jar, but something shared, over stew, over pears, over whispered promises and stolen figs. Still, you tuck a bit of tiger root into your pouch, just in case. By now, you've tried pickled testicles, honeyed tiger root, and half a dozen aphrodisiacs with suspicious aftertastes. You've had conversations with goats, possibly real, possibly hallucinated, and learned that romance in ancient Persia was just as much about flavor as it was about feeling. But this next stop? This one's about fire. Not the romantic candlelight sort, literal, eternal flame. You're standing in front of a Zoroastrian fire temple, its white walls gleaming in the sun, its bronze doors embossed with symbols older than half the spices you've tasted. Inside, a sacred flame has been burning for centuries, tended by generations of priests who believe fire represents purity, truth, and divine energy. You're not here for theology, though. You're here for desire, sacred, smoky, and perhaps slightly dangerous. A priest in white robes greets you. His voice is low, his pace slow. Everything about him radiates calm. He invites you to sit near the flame, not too close, and begins explaining a ritual that once combined spiritual devotion with the cultivation of ishq, or love, understood as a force of both body and soul. True passion, he says, is fire properly tended. Not too wild, not too dim. You nod, try not to inhale too much incense. In Zoroastrian, balance is everything. Hot and cold, wet and dry, active and receptive. The same principles that govern medicine and food applied to romantic life too. And fire? Fire was both symbol and substance. He offers you a cup of something thick and grayish with a smoky scent. Ash milk, he says. You sip. It tastes like roasted nuts, cream, and the memory of something burned slightly too long. Walnut, camel milk, and a touch of ash from the sacred fire, he explains, used in fertility rites, said to stir the spirit without inflaming the body. You raise an eyebrow. The body feels moderately inflamed. This drink, he says, would have been consumed during Nowruz, the Persian New Year, particularly by couples hoping for children, or at least a little more enthusiasm in the evenings. The ash was believed to carry divine purity, while the camel milk grounded the drinker in the earthly body. Together, they were meant to harmonize inner desires with outer intentions. Historians still argue whether this was a widely practiced ritual or limited to a few regions or sects. Some believe the ingredients changed with every generation. Others claim it was never meant to be consumed at all, but used as a symbolic offering, left beside a fire, then buried beneath rose bushes. You hope that version's true. Your stomach does, anyway. The priest continues, now reciting from a prayer scroll used in intimate ceremonies. The text invokes fire not as a destroyer, but as a guardian of love. It ends with a phrase that translates roughly to, "May your touch be as warm and your words as bright." You're quiet for a while. Then, almost casually, the priest reaches into a side pouch and pulls out a small, cloth-wrapped bundle. Inside, a set of carved wooden sticks, wrapped in red thread. He explains they're part of a heating charm, a folk tradition borrowed from nearby villages where Zoroastrian and rural customs blend freely. The sticks, when burned, release a scent described in one scroll as the smell of longing, which sounds suspiciously like sandalwood in marketing. You watch as he lights one. The scent is indeed longing adjacent. Warm, slightly sweet, with a smoky bass note that clings to your skin like memory. He tells you a story passed down through temple tradition of two lovers who could only meet once a year during the spring equinox. Before parting, they'd light one of these sticks and let the smoke swirl between them. The idea was that the flame would carry their desire into the heavens to be preserved until their next meeting. Poetic, potentially flammable, very on brand. Quirky fringe fact, in one remote fire temple, a now lost text reportedly listed acceptable offerings for enhancing affection. It included almonds, dates, 3 rose petals, a copper coin, and something called lion's sigh, which no one's been able to translate. Scholars suspect it was either a perfume or a very dramatic name for steam. You're handed a small dish of dried fruit next, figs and apricots soaked in rosewater and dusted with powdered ginger. Earthly pleasure, the priest says, reminds us that spirit lives in the senses. You take a bite. The ginger stings a little, but the apricot is sweet and tender, like sunlight soaked into flesh. For a moment, you forget that you're here to research ancient romance. You're just here, tasting warmth, watching the fire flicker, listening to stories from a man who sees no contradiction between passion and prayer. Desire, he says, is sacred when shared with kindness. You leave the temple with a small satchel of fire-scented sticks and a warm belly full of camel milk and metaphysical implications. The streets are busier now, but you move more slowly, like a person who's just been slightly anointed, slightly fed, and slightly smoked. And maybe, just maybe, you're starting to see why people once looked at their pantry and thought, you know what would help? More ash. The further you walk, the silkier the air becomes, perfumed with rose, thick with spices, and pulsing with a kind of leisurely decadence that says, welcome to nobility, where everything costs too much and absolutely nothing happens quickly. You're in a wealthy quarter now. You can tell by the size of the door knockers and the presence of grape arbors curling overhead like gossip. A gate swings open before you knock, and a noblewoman steps into view. She's dressed in linen, silver bangles up to her elbow, a knowing smile already on her face. You're late, she says, though you're not. The milk's already frothing. Before you can protest, she sweeps you through a courtyard shaded by fig trees and into a tiled sitting room with silk cushions, mosaic walls, and an actual servant whose job appears to be wafting the scent of jasmine with a fan. A tray is waiting. On it, a copper bowl of warm, foamy liquid, pale, fragrant, and slightly fizzing. Camel milk, she says, fermented, My grandmother swore by it. You hesitate. It bubbles like it has opinions. Don't be shy, she urges. It's good for circulation and clarity and confidence. You sip. The taste is a roller coaster. First creamy, then sour, then inexplicably peppery. It's like someone put yogurt in a blender with mischief and ambition. In ancient Persia, fermented camel milk, shubat or doog in some regions, was prized not just for nutrition, but for its supposed mood-enhancing, invigorating effects. Mixed with herbs, fruit, or even flower petals, it was occasionally served as a bedtime tonic, especially among women of the court who couldn't risk wine but still wanted something to gladden the heart. Historians still argue whether these claims were rooted in chemistry. Camel milk is rich in minerals and enzymes, or simply in the psychosomatic glow of ritual and tradition. Your hostess leans back against a pillow and snaps her fingers. Another tray arrives, this one bearing tiny bowls of soft cheese with lavender, flatbread with nigella seeds, and honey folded with crushed almonds. It's not just what you eat, she says, it's how you eat it. She proceeds to demonstrate. A bite of cheese, a sip of milk, a slow, deliberate sigh. This, she explains, is the rhythm of romance, sensory, unhurried, slightly dangerous if you have allergies. You nibble your flatbread and wonder how anyone ever got anything done in a world where meals take 4 hours and involve fan choreography. Quirky detail. Noble women in some courts of the Safavid period were known to pass love notes scented with fermented milk mixtures, believed to carry not just fragrance, but emotional residue. One recipe advised steeping crushed basil and a single tear into the milk before dabbing it onto fabric. According to Sex with Kings, one 17th century princess used this method so effectively that her lover, an envoy from a northern kingdom, claimed he could smell her presence in any room she had recently left, which is either deeply romantic or mildly unsettling, possibly both. You shift slightly on your cushion, catching a whiff of rose oil from the folds of the fabric. Your hostess smiles again. People think desire is about heat, she says, but it's really about softness, letting your guard fall, letting the senses rise. She offers you a bowl of rice pudding, thick with saffron and garnished with slivers of pistachio and candied rose petal. This, she whispers, is for dreams. You take a bite. The sweetness spreads through you like a lullaby. Warm, slow, slightly narcotic. She tells you her grandmother's trick, eating pudding like this just before bed, then sleeping with a sachet of dried violets under the pillow. Supposedly, it summoned dreams of true love, or at least of soft lighting and decent conversation. Did it work, you ask? Every time, she says. Though once, it summoned a tax collector. We never figured that one out. You sip more of the milk. It no longer tastes sour, just strange and familiar, like something you might crave again someday, but never admit to. She shares a poem from memory. The milk of dusk is not for thirst. It is for memory, for holding the scent of touch on the tongue of silence. You sit in silence for a while. The fan continues its gentle sweep. Outside, a dove calls once, then goes quiet. And for a moment, you feel utterly weightless, like your body has become a bowl of warm milk, like you've been poured into comfort. When you finally stand, the noblewoman smiles and presses a vial of rose oil into your palm. Not everything needs to be eaten, she says. Some things just linger. You step back into the shaded courtyard, your breath tinged with sweetness and the mild dizziness of semi-fermented dairy. The fig trees rustle above you. You feel slow, soft, and perhaps a little enchanted. You've drunk the milk, you've eaten the petals, you've passed the test, and you didn't even spill anything on the pillows. You're walking now through one of the older quarters of the city, the kind drawn in ink rather than mapped in stone. The streets here twist in on themselves like secrets, and the buildings lean ever so slightly inward, as though eavesdropping on your every footstep. Overhead, grape arbors tangle with flowering vines, casting dappled shadows across doors too old to remember their first knock. It's quieter here. Not sleepy. No, far too alive for that, but quietly vibrating with stories. You round a corner and find a low vine-draped wall behind which lies what can only be called a secret, a garden, shaded, overgrown, and echoing softly with music. There's a rusted iron gate slightly ajar and you hesitate, not because you aren't welcome, but because places like this rarely announce themselves. You step inside, and just like that, time folds. You're in a garden older than memory, and more fragrant than logic. The air is thick with the perfume of jasmine, myrtle, and orange blossoms. Fruit trees stretch toward the sky as if mid-song, and a small canal runs through the center. Its water as clear as glass and just cool enough to invite a fingertip. You trail your hand along its edge, and for a moment you forget everything else. A woman appears beside you, barefoot, with a silver tray balanced effortlessly on one hip. She sets it down on a nearby stone table and gestures for you to sit. "You're just in time," she says, as though this moment had been planned for centuries. "The wine has just reached the perfect temperature." You blink. "I didn't know wine had a temperature." She smiles. "Everything does, even longing." On the tray, 2 glasses of deep red wine, thick, spiced, mysterious, and a dish of candied violets arranged like little edible jewels. You sip first. The wine is warm, perfumed with cinnamon, black pepper, and what might be dried rose hips. It spreads slowly through your chest like molten gold. "This," she says, "is what forbidden tastes like." And she's not wrong. In ancient Persia, Shiraz was more than just a city. It was an idea. A place where poetry dripped from balconies, where philosophers debated beneath fig trees, and where lovers met behind latticed windows to trade glances and metaphors. Known as the cradle of Persian lyricism, Shiraz wasn't just about beauty. It was about the cultivation of feeling. Here, the act of sharing wine, or even sherbet, could be an invitation. Not always to the body, but to the soul. A declaration of "I see you," and sometimes that was enough. Historians still argue, the woman says, swirling her wine, whether these gardens were spaces of quiet rebellion or simply luxurious escapes. I think they were both. You take a candied violet. It crunches softly between your teeth, leaving behind the floral taste of something you might once have dreamt. She brings another dish, sliced melon, dusted with mint and black salt. "Cooling," she explains. "Essential after wine. Keeps the heart from overreaching." You bite. It's juicy, sweet, and sharply bracing. The salt flickers on your tongue like electricity. You feel awake in a way that has nothing to do with caffeine. It's here, reclining under a pomegranate tree, that she begins to recite verses by Hafiz, the 14th century poet who lived and loved among these very stones. His poems were famed not only for their beauty, but for their unapologetic sensuality. I wish I could show you when you are lonely or in darkness, the astonishing light of your own being. She pauses. He wrote that after drinking quince wine, or after heartbreak. Possibly both. Then she hands you a plate of grilled peaches, charred slightly, drizzled with a syrup made from dates and cardamom. You eat. The smoke and the sweetness blur together, a strange alchemy of comfort and excitement. Quirky fringe fact: according to one manuscript from the 11th century, peaches grilled over fig wood were considered so aphrodisiacal they were banned from being served at diplomatic functions. Apparently, too many awkward alliances had been formed during dessert. She laughs when you tell her this. And now we serve them at weddings. There's more. A dish of thick yogurt whipped with saffron and garnished with pomegranate seeds. A tiny cup of rose sherbet so cold it makes your teeth ache, but in a good way. And finally, a spoonful of something golden, rose petal jam, cooked low and slow until it melts like silk on your tongue. As you eat, she shares stories of lovers who met in these very gardens. One poet who left a letter hidden in a quince tree and waited 4 days for a reply. Another who courted his beloved entirely through food, a fig left at her doorstep one morning, a warm bowl of barley stew the next. There are 100 ways to say I love you in this city, she says, and most of them are edible. You lean back, the wine swirling gently in your blood, the air thick with the scent of basil and warm stone. The garden hums around you. A musician somewhere is playing the ney flute, its sound long and plaintive, like a sigh stretched into melody. For a moment, you forget you're researching aphrodisiacs. You're simply existing, in a garden where time is slow and love is everywhere, and even silence has flavor. She passes you a final cup, something clear, cold, and faintly bitter. Rosewater and basil seeds, she says, for the road, to keep your steps light and your memory warm. You drink, you stand. And as you step through the gate back into the winding city, you don't feel like a visitor anymore. You feel like someone who has been welcomed. Your feet carry you away from the gardens in a kind of scented trance, past crumbling walls coated in sun-bleached poetry, and down into a lane that seems to grow narrower with every step. The smell changes here. Less floral, more mysterious. Smoky, herbal, and just a little bit like something your dermatologist might warn you about. You've arrived at the perfumer's quarter. This is where romance is bottled, where seduction is distilled and dabbed behind the ears, and where a single vial of oil can cost more than a horse. You follow your nose toward a small domed shop where the door is made not of wood but of thick, worn leather. Inside, it's dark, cool and humid like a hammam, and every surface glistens. Shelves hold hundreds of glass flasks, each sealed with wax, each marked in gold ink with names like Night's Breath, Tiger's Whisper, and Memory of Saffron. A man appears from the shadows. He's slender, soft-spoken, and smells like he bathes in sandalwood and secrets. You seek a scent, he says, but perhaps what you truly seek is a result. You don't argue. You're already here. He gestures for you to sit on a velvet cushion and begins uncorking bottles. The Persians, he explains, did not separate scent from seduction. If a lover remembered your smell, they remembered your presence, your breath, your nearness. This was the foundation of longing. He dabs something behind your ear. It's sharp, citrusy, with a kick of clove and something animal. Ambergris, maybe. He nods. This one was worn by a poet who could not stop falling in love with strangers. You breathe it in. It feels dangerous. In ancient Persia, perfumed oils were considered potent love aids, not because they altered hormones, but because they altered memory. A beloved scent could linger in linens, on letters, even in dreams. One poet described his beloved's absence as a room where the rose oil still speaks her name. Historians still argue, the perfumer says, whether certain scents had biochemical effects or simply acted as emotional anchors. He uncorks a second bottle. The smell is earthy, like rain on stone, sweetened with fig. This, he says, was worn by a prince who fell in love every spring. Some blame the pollen. I blame the poetry. You ask what's in it. Myrtle, fig resin, ground rose root, and a touch of pepper paste. You blink. Pepper? For heat, he says. Desire needs warmth to move. He mixes a drop of it into a small brass bowl with crushed sesame seeds and something he won't name. This, he explains, is not a perfume. It is an ointment, meant to be applied to the chest before a lover's arrival. He hands you a scroll. The instructions are poetic. Anoint the heart where it beats most boldly and speak no words after. You ask, naturally, if it works. He shrugs. Sometimes, when the timing is right. Then he tells you about a famous woman in the Qajar court known only as the scent mistress. According to court gossip, she never wore the same perfume twice. Every day was a new blend. Clove and jasmine one morning, cardamom and mint the next. Lovers would chase her not through palaces, but through olfactory breadcrumbs. One poem says, I followed her scent through 6 doors, only to find my own longing. You try a third perfume. This one is cool, almost icy, floral and faintly metallic. Mint and violet, he says, for restraint, for lovers who cannot meet but still wish to speak. Quirky fringe tidbit. A rare 12th century scroll mentions an invisible perfume, a scent brewed with moon-steeped lotus petals that supposedly could not be detected by the nose, but would still soften the gaze of the one who beholds you. Scholars today think it was just water infused with wishful thinking. The perfumer returns with something unexpected, a food item. Flatbread rubbed with pepper paste, rose oil, and a drizzle of honey. This, he says, was once considered a lover's breakfast. You bite. It's spicy sweet and entirely too seductive for this hour of day. In ancient Persian kitchens, the line between food and perfume was paper thin. Oils were rubbed on the skin, yes, but also mixed into dishes. Basil oil for calming, rose oil for desire, and sesame oil for warmth. You imagine a nobleman licking rose oil from his fingers and wondering if he's in love or just hungry. Smell is a doorway, the perfumer says. Once opened, it's difficult to close. He hands you a final vial, this one sealed in wax and bound with silk thread. Do not open it now, he warns. Open it when you wish to be remembered. You slip it into your satchel. It's heavy. It smells faintly, even through the seal of something old and golden. You leave the shop dizzied by scent, your skin tingling with clove and citrus and memory. The air outside feels sharper now, almost too clean, like someone turned down the volume on the world. And yet something lingers. Behind your ear, beneath your collar, you are no longer alone. You carry a ghost of desire with you. And somewhere out there, someone's nose might recognize it. The further you drift from the perfumed elegance of Shiraz's inner circles, the more the city starts to whisper to itself in stranger tongues. Gone are the perfumers with their silk robes and sandalwood secrets. The air is now heavier, dustier, touched with the scent of clay, wood smoke, and something faintly animal. You follow the smell of scorched mint and come upon a crooked alley lined with low stalls. One of them catches your eye, not because it's the biggest or the brightest, but because it has no sign. Just a woven mat, a small fire, and a woman hunched over a mortar the size of your head. She's grinding something dark and brittle, and she looks up the moment you approach. "You've come for the lizard," she says. Your brain takes a full beat to catch up. "Ah, what?" She nods toward the pot behind her. "Desert gecko. Dried. Boiled with saffron and clove. Good for the blood. Good for the nights." A puff of steam rises behind her, carrying with it a scent that is equal parts spice, earth, and oddly nostalgic, like someone tried to make soup from a memory. You sit on the mat mostly because your knees decide not to risk standing. The woman doesn't ask for coin. She doesn't ask your name. She simply pours the contents of the pot into a small clay cup and holds it out to you. You take it. Sip cautiously. The first note is saffron, sharp, golden, a little bitter. Then something roasted and gamey, like jerky that's been blessed and mildly cursed. Finally, a lingering sweetness that tastes a bit like cardamom and daring. "You'll feel it in the belly first," she says. "Then the ears. Then, if the moon's in the right mood, the heart." In certain desert regions of ancient Persia, aphrodisiac traditions didn't come from palace doctors or scholarly scrolls. They came from folk magic, desert herbology, and generations of whispered experimentation. Dried animals, especially geckos, lizards, or snakes, were believed to carry potent warmth, especially when combined with moistening herbs like licorice or mint. In a culture where everything was about balancing heat and moisture, these tonics were fire in a teacup. Historians still argue, she mutters as she stirs the pot again, whether the gecko tonic ever stirred anything more than bowels. But the desert believes in results, not theories. You look into your cup, half empty, or half full of lizard, depending on your outlook. She leans in as if to share a secret. But that's not the good stuff. She reaches under her mat and pulls out a polished box of dried herbs tied with colored threads. Each bundle smells different, sweet, pungent, herbal, or a little floral with an edge. She unties one and sprinkles the contents over a hot coal. Instantly, the air fills with smoke that smells of mint, cinnamon, and something cool like memory on a winter morning. "These," she says, "are not spells. They are reminders." She passes you a tiny scroll, tied with a faded ribbon. You unroll it. Inside is a recipe, not for food, not for perfume, but for intention. Mix 1 clove, 1 petal, a whisper of honey, and the name of the one you love. Stir 3 times clockwise under candlelight. Place beneath pillow. Wait for the answer. You glance up. "What kind of answer?" She shrugs. "That's the fun part." Quirky fringe fact. In the border towns of Persia, especially those that brushed against Mesopotamian or Indian influence, love spells were often performed with food-like rituals. Sesame, honey, nuts, rose, even flour were considered proper vehicles for longing. One particularly odd record describes a woman baking tiny flatbreads with her beloved's name written in turmeric. She'd bury one under his doorstep and eat the other. "Love will grow in the silence between bites," the scroll says. You tell her about that. She nods, unsurprised. The mouth remembers what the heart tries to forget. She lights another coal, this time sprinkling a powder that smells like cinnamon and dried apricot. "This one," she says, "helps lovers speak honestly, or cry. Sometimes both." She offers you a bite of her evening mixture, a thick paste of crushed pistachio, dried date, saffron, black seed, and a hint of something sour. You taste it. It's intense. Sweet at first, then a slow warmth spreads down your throat. Your lips tingle. Your spine hums. "It sharpens," she says. Not the desire. The desire is already there. It sharpens the focus, makes you see what you really want. You nod slowly. Then she hands you one last item, a small flat stone wrapped in thread. "For under the tongue," she says, "when you can't speak your truth out loud, you ask if it works, only if the truth is ready to be heard." There's a lull. The pot still simmers. The smoke curls gently around you. In the stillness, you realize something. This isn't about love the way the nobles told it. It's not about beauty or courtship or elegant poetry. It's about honesty, hunger, that low, unspoken need to be seen, held, remembered. You stand, heart buzzing with saffron and lizard and whatever else she put in that paste. She doesn't say goodbye. She just smiles, her teeth flashing briefly in the firelight. You walk away slowly, the street closing behind you like a curtain. You taste smoke on your breath and spice on your lips. You have no idea whether anything she gave you will work, but you're hoping it does. And if not, you'll always have the lizard. You're walking through the edge of the city now, where the hills begin to rise, and the stone paths give way to dusty, winding tracks, flanked by wild fennel and clumps of sage. The city's perfume has faded behind you, replaced by something earthier, older, and faintly unwashed. You've left behind scholars and sultans, healers and herbalists, and now you're heading straight into the land of sorcery. The village appears almost suddenly, nestled into the folds of a hill like it's hiding from time itself. The houses are small, mud brick with thatched roofs, their courtyards shaded by twisted olive trees. There are no signs, just the distant sound of a drum and the smell of something burning that is definitely not dinner. You follow the smoke. A group has gathered in the village square, elders sitting on blankets, children nibbling on roasted chickpeas, and a woman in red stirring a cauldron with a stick that looks suspiciously ceremonial. She spots you, lifts an eyebrow, and says, "Ah, you're just in time for the sesame spell." Naturally, you take a seat on the ground as she begins to explain, slowly, rhythmically, like she's done this for every traveler, every pilgrim, every poor soul who wandered in hoping to fix a broken heart with pantry staples. The spell, she tells you, is simple. One handful of toasted sesame seeds, a spoonful of honey, a dash of ground cinnamon. Mix until the paste holds its shape. Form into small balls, whisper your desire over them 3 times, then toss the first one into fire. Eat the rest before sunset. You ask the obvious, what kind of desires? She shrugs. Romantic, sensual, poetic, possibly revenge. We don't judge. You help stir the pot. The aroma is intoxicating, sweet, nutty, and spiced with something faintly wild. According to old folk beliefs, sesame was considered a seed of revelation. It didn't just bring strength or fertility, it opened things. Minds, mouths, occasionally doors that should have stayed closed. Combined with cinnamon and honey, it became a paste of persuasion, useful in everything from courtship to argument to seduction rituals conducted under the full moon with zero supervision. Historians still argue, she says, handing you a lump of sesame paste, whether this was ever taken seriously by the elite, but the villagers knew. They always know. You take a bite. It's warm, sticky, comforting, like the kind of candy your grandmother might make if she also dabbled in erotic spell work. She brings out a bowl of warm milk mixed with turmeric and rosewater. To cool the blood, she says. Even passion needs pacing. Then a chant begins, low, steady, almost musical. The group leans into the rhythm as another woman draws a circle in the dirt with powdered basil, mint, and dried fig skin. A young man enters, barefoot, holding a candle and a plum. This appears to be part of a ritual, or just a very specific dessert presentation. You watch as the plum is passed from hand to hand, each person whispering something into it. Finally, the candle is used to burn a bit of parchment, and the ashes are sprinkled over the plum. Quirky fringe tidbit. In some rural parts of Persia, lovers would exchange plums during festivals, not flowers. Why? Because plums bruise easily. They were a test. If your lover returned your plum unbruised, it meant they had handled your heart with care. The plum, in this case, is eaten by a girl with a braid down to her waist. She smiles as the crowd claps softly. The woman in red returns, this time carrying a jar filled with crushed sesame, ginger, black seed, and what looks like powdered rose petals. This one, she says, is for those who don't want love. They want to be remembered. You raise an eyebrow. Sometimes, she explains, people don't want to be loved. They want to haunt someone's thoughts. They want to linger. She pours a spoonful into your hand. The powder is warm and smells like regret and nostalgia. You taste it. It fizzes slightly on your tongue, then fades into something sour-sweet, like a goodbye you never gave. You sit with the villagers long into the evening, sipping spiced tea and watching the stars rise one by one. Around you, people talk in quiet tones about dreams, about marriages that didn't take, about lovers who vanished into caravan lines and never came back. Love, someone says, is a story we keep telling, even when no one is listening anymore. There's food too, flatbread with honey and fennel, fig compote served with warm milk, and tiny squares of almond and cardamom sweet that stick to your teeth like promises. Everything is shared. No plates, no performance, just passing and eating and nodding. You're offered a charm to take with you, a dried fig filled with sesame paste and a single basil leaf inside. Don't eat it, the woman in red warns. Just carry it. It knows what you forgot. You tuck it into your pouch, next to the lizard dream, the scroll, and the perfume vial you still haven't opened. By the time you leave, the fire has died down. The circle in the dirt has faded. But something about the air feels different, warmer, more watchful. Like the village is letting you go, but not quite forgetting you. You walk back down the hill under a sky so starry it feels embroidered. The sesame still coats your teeth. Your heart feels both lighter and heavier. You don't know if the spell worked, but something opened, and it's not closing anytime soon. The morning light is soft and golden as you follow a winding marble path lined with low hedges, lavender bushes, and servants who manage to walk silently despite wearing an absurd amount of embroidered linen. Somewhere behind you, the village fades like a half-remembered dream. And ahead? Ahead lies something that feels almost mythic. You've heard whispers, rumors, the kind spoken with a wink in taverns and scrawled on the backs of scrolls too risque for the library. Tonight, or rather, sometime between the dying of dusk and the first yawn of dawn, you've been invited to the banquet. Not just any feast, mind you. The banquet. The one they say only happens when Venus crosses the sky at a certain angle, or when the Sultan finds his heart too quiet and his stomach too loud. A servant with eyebrows sharper than his scimitar gestures for you to enter. You do, because how could you not? The room is circular, high-ceilinged, lit entirely by oil lamps suspended in midair like stars paused mid-fall. The walls are mirrored, not flat but rippling like the inside of a dream made of water and gold. At the center, a serpentine table, low to the ground, covered in silk, silver, and so much food it defies both physics and moderation. You're seated on a velvet cushion with no label, no nameplate, just the unspoken understanding that for now, you belong. And then the feast begins. No fanfare, no announcements, just the quiet arrival of platters so beautiful they seem designed to make you hesitate. But you don't. The first dish, roasted lamb steeped in rose vinegar and smoked over almond wood, garnished with violet petals and saffron threads. It smells like poetry written in hunger. You take a bite. The meat falls apart before your tongue has time to greet it. Second, eggplant roasted until nearly collapsed, filled with cinnamon, crushed walnuts, and dates soaked in pomegranate molasses. It's sweet and smoky and oddly sensual, like the culinary equivalent of someone tracing your name in cursive on a fogged-up window. Then comes a salad. But of course, this is no ordinary salad. This is a tower of pickled peaches, arugula dressed in rosewater and fig vinegar, and slivers of dried lime that tingle on contact. You swear your mouth starts writing poetry in protest. Still, no one speaks. Every guest eats in silence. Not a solemn kind of silence. Not reverence exactly. It's more like containment, as though whatever's happening here might spill over if given voice. Then it arrives, the centerpiece. A platter the size of a small boat stacked in concentric circles of golden rice, roasted quail, candied almonds, slivered dates, and somehow a perfectly intact honeycomb resting atop a small mountain of spiced lamb. Steam curls off the edges like breath. The smell is indescribable. Sweet, yes. Spicy, definitely. But layered with something more, a memory, a longing, the unmistakable scent of something you once loved and didn't know you'd lost. You take a bite, and then another. And then you forget your own name for a moment. Someone weeps, quietly. It's fine. Dessert arrives like a procession. First, chilled rose custard in a bowl of carved obsidian. Then a trio of candied mango slices, arranged in the shape of a lotus. And finally, a single dried apricot dipped in something iridescent and dusted with gold powder. You don't eat it. You study it. It looks like a metaphor. And then, the Sultan enters. No trumpet, no dramatic drumbeat. He just walks in, barefoot, in a robe of midnight blue stitched with stars. He sits across from you, rests his chin on his hand, and smiles like someone who's just heard the world's best secret and isn't telling. He places a small bottle in front of you. It's glass, sealed with wax, empty, or at least it seems that way. This, he says softly, is not to be drunk. You nod. You learned your lesson with the lizard tonic. It is to be broken. Your hands tremble as you snap the seal. A single breath escapes, a scent that wraps around you like silk in a sandstorm, basil, myrrh, burnt cinnamon, and a whisper of cardamom. It smells like everything you never said. Love, he says, isn't always an ingredient. Sometimes it's a residue. You don't speak. You can't. The scent has undone your tongue. He stands, nods once, and vanishes into the mirrored shadows. You look around. The banquet continues. No one seems to notice the Sultan is gone. Or perhaps he was never truly there. Historians still argue, one dusty scroll notes, whether the Sultan's banquet was ever real. Some say it was a ritual, others a vision. Most agree those who attend are never quite the same. Quirky fringe detail? A 16th century traveler claimed the Sultan's dessert included powdered moonstone, and that guests left unable to speak for 3 days, not out of awe, but because the dessert unstitched their words. He never found the banquet again. He spent the rest of his life looking. You leave through a different door than the one you entered. The sun is just rising now, and the city stretches before you like a tired lion. You walk barefoot across cool marble steps, your skin smelling faintly of burnt sugar and longing. You don't know what was in that bottle. You don't know what just happened, but you know something shifted. Like a lock inside you has turned, and now some small, previously silenced room is breathing again. You reach into your robe and find the bottle is gone, but the scent lingers, and tonight when you sleep, you'll taste rose, honey, and something else. Something wordless. Something that doesn't need a recipe. You're well outside the city now. The stone buildings have given way to sloping hills, olive groves, and the slow, rhythmic rustling of tall grasses stirred by late afternoon wind. Everything feels quieter out here, slower. The air smells of dust, dry wood, and wild oregano. A shepherd waves as you pass, his sheep unbothered by your presence. A woman stirs something in a pot over a fire the color of apricot. She nods once, knowingly. And up ahead, at the edge of the village, if you can even call this scattering of homes a village, you spot it. A cottage, squat, mud-bricked, its door crooked, its shutters uneven. The roof is thatched with reeds and age. There's a goat lying in front of it like a guard, staring at you with the intense judgment only goats can manage. You hesitate. The goat does not. You step over it and knock. The door creaks like it's trying to warn you. Inside, the smell hits you. Basil, clearly, and smoke, and something sharper. Possibly fennel, possibly mischief. A voice calls from the shadows. Took you long enough? Come in. The basil's ready. You oblige. The interior is a curious combination of kitchen, apothecary, and prophecy cave. Herbs hang in bundles from the ceiling. Dried pomegranates swing lazily in the breeze from a cracked window. On the floor, an intricate pattern has been chalked, circles within circles, with a mortar and pestle sitting right in the center like a punctuation mark. The woman who owns the voice is stirring a pot on a clay stove. She's wrapped in layer after layer of faded cotton and wears a headscarf patterned with, what else? Dried basil leaves. She gestures for you to sit. We've got a ritual to prepare for. You oblige again because, frankly, she doesn't seem like someone who takes kindly to hesitation. She explains as she works. Every spring, when the first full moon rises after Nowruz, the Persian New Year, the villagers gather in the hills. Bonfires are lit, not for warmth and not for feasting, but for cleansing. They bring old worries, failed hopes, dried herbs, bits of paper scribbled with things no one dares say aloud, and they toss it all into the flames. Then, with hands still warm from the fire, they eat. But not just anything, she says. No, they eat what they've prepared in silence, with intent, with care. You ask what she means. She hands you a small ball of sticky paste. It smells sweet and peppery. Almond, date, cinnamon, black seed, basil, all crushed together and rolled by hand. These aren't snacks, these are offerings. You take a bite. It's dense, chewy, oddly grounding. We call them ashik bonbons, she says with a smirk. Lover's candy. You eat one before the fire to remember what you lost, another during to remember what you need, and a third after, only if you know what you want next. You blink. What if you don't? She shrugs. Then you carry it, until you do. Historians still argue, she adds, whether these rituals had any real magical effect, but no one ever left one without crying a little, or kissing someone they shouldn't. You help her roll the rest of the candy, tucking tiny basil leaves into the center of each. She shows you how to fold them in cloth and tie them with red string. Red is for action, she explains. White is for peace. Black is for closure. Don't mix them unless you like chaos. You reach for the black thread. She snatches it away. Outside, the villagers begin to gather. You follow her into the dusk, where a clearing on the hill glows with the first crackle of fire. Children chase each other with dried herbs. Elders sit in a ring, passing around rosewater. Someone's playing a frame drum, slow and steady, like a heartbeat at rest. The woman distributes her basil bundles. Basil burns blue, she tells the group. When it does, you speak your truth. She nods to you. You go first. You step toward the fire. The flames reach for the sky like gossip let loose. You hold your bundle over the heat. It catches quickly. Blue sparks fly upward. And before you can think twice, you whisper a word. Just one. No one hears it but the fire. The flames eat your basil with alarming enthusiasm. The blue fades. You step back. Then you unwrap your second candy. The sweetness hits differently this time. Deeper. There's a bitterness now. Maybe from the black seed. Maybe from something you've been carrying too long. Around you, others take their turns. Some laugh. Some cry. Some simply stare at the fire like it owes them an answer. A young woman tosses in a dried fig. A man burns a love letter written on silk. One child drops in a drawing, then eats 3 candies in a row and declares himself ready for adulthood. The elders nod solemnly. Quirky fringe fact. One 13th century scroll found in a village like this describes a ritual nearly identical, except instead of basil, they used crushed mint and fennel. And instead of fire, they whispered into clay jars sealed with wax. The jars were buried for a year. When unearthed, they were said to contain either perfume or complete nonsense, depending on the strength of one's conviction. You return to the cottage well after midnight. Your lips are sticky. Your fingers smell of ash and herbs. The woman brews one last cup of tea, dark, sweet, and slightly sour. For balance, she says, love burns, desire cools. You need both to sleep. She hands you one final thing, a tiny bag of dried basil and almond slivers. Keep this near your bed, just in case. You ask, in case of what? She smiles. In case you ever forget that love starts in the kitchen and sometimes ends there too. You sleep under a blanket of old quilts with the fire crackling outside and the scent of basil folded into your dreams. And somewhere in the night, the goat finally blinks. You're walking now through open countryside, your feet coated in dust and your heart just a little too full of dried basil and half-whispered prayers. The road curves past crumbling aqueducts and silent fig orchards, and in the distance you spot something out of place. A mansion. Not royal, not opulent, just oddly grand for this part of the world. A strange hybrid of rural quiet and faded nobility. The kind of house where secrets ferment in the cellar and relatives argue about inheritance in hushed tones behind beaded curtains. You step through an open gate and are immediately greeted by a servant whose posture suggests long-suffering patience and a deeply held grudge against the sun. Welcome, he says without smiling. The family awaits. Inside, the house is cool and dim. You're led past portrait-lined halls, past cracked tiles glazed with pomegranate motifs, and finally into a wide room filled with velvet cushions, low tables, and a scent so heavy with sweetness it nearly takes physical form. 3 women sit waiting, sisters by the look of them, all beautiful, all slightly bored, and all currently engaged in a heated debate about, of all things, mango pickles. Yes, the eldest hisses, but it wasn't the mango, it was what she served it with. Chili oil and mint, the middle sister says wistfully. I remember, she said it made him fall in love with her, or fall into a week-long nosebleed. It's unclear. You're seated beside a dish of what appears to be the infamous pickle in question, bright yellow, gleaming, treacherously spicy. You ask what's going on. The youngest sighs. We're discussing a family legend, Great Aunt Bahar and her pickles. One dinner, one taste, and apparently, allegedly, she seduced a Persian cavalry captain so thoroughly he abandoned his regiment, stole 2 camels, and tried to start a goat farm with her in the mountains. Historians still argue, the eldest says, whether the mango was to blame or the goat farm. You taste the pickle. It is assertive, tangy, sweet, then heat, so much heat. Your ears feel it first, then your scalp. The youngest claps. You didn't faint. That's promising. They begin laying out other dishes, all tied in some way to this intergenerational recipe war. There's rose petal jam spiked with lemon peel and anise, apricot compote soaked in cinnamon and star anise, tiny meatballs seasoned with dill and dried plum. Each dish, they explain, has been accused of being aphrodisiacal. None confirmed. All weaponized during various courtships, arguments, and on one occasion, a land dispute. You learn that one ancestor once served eggplant stew with saffron and black vinegar at a dinner party, causing two rival families to call off a blood feud, or possibly fall asleep, the middle sister admits. Hard to tell. They hand you a glass of cold tea brewed with basil, rosehip, and dried orange peel. It's floral, tart, and oddly calming. Then the eldest sister produces the real reason you're here, a scroll, a family heirloom. She unrolls it carefully. The ink is faded, the calligraphy elegant. It appears to be part recipe book, part confession journal. The top entry reads, mango pickle of complicated intentions. Ingredients, green mango, vinegar, salt, fenugreek, mustard seeds, saffron, chili, one unresolved feeling. Instructions, prepare during a waning moon. Stir only clockwise. Do not serve unless prepared to deal with consequences. You laugh. They don't. One of the sisters, the quietest, leans forward. Every time someone makes that pickle, something changes. She lists events, an engagement broken off, a mysterious pregnancy, a camel trade gone terribly right. You ask if the recipe actually works. The middle sister shrugs. Maybe it's not the pickle. Maybe it's the courage people find after they've eaten it. Quirky fringe tidbit. In one obscure love manual, preserved in the archives of an Eastern monastery, mango was listed as an emotional enhancer, particularly when paired with vinegar and saffron. The author warned, do not serve to the melancholy, do not eat alone, and never, under any circumstance, combine with garlic on a Tuesday. The sisters laugh when you tell them. That sounds about right, the youngest says. Garlic ruins everything. They insist you stay for dinner. You don't argue. The meal is sprawling, fragrant, and slightly competitive. Every dish has a story, and every story involves someone falling in love or into trouble after tasting it. There's yogurt with mint and cucumber. There's rice soaked in rosewater. There are pickled grapes that apparently caused a duel. You feel like you're dining in a novel that hasn't been written yet. After the meal, they send you off with a small jar of the infamous mango pickle. For emergencies, they say. As you walk down the long gravel path, the stars begin to emerge one by one. You can still taste the pickle. It tingles, it haunts, and somewhere inside, you're beginning to suspect that the stories might be true, not because the food has magic, but because people believe it does. And belief in the right setting is the most seductive spice of all. The jar of mango pickle you receive from the sisters rests snugly in your satchel, clicking softly against the small bottle of scent you almost forgot you still carried. The night is turned gentle, warm but not oppressive, and the road ahead feels like it's leading you somewhere quieter. The stars above are doing that thing again, twinkling as if they're in on some delicious secret you've only just been invited to learn. You wander down a dirt path edged by tall grasses and sleeping fig trees. The moon is a thin crescent now, more suggestion than spotlight. You follow the breeze, which smells faintly of wood smoke, jasmine, and sugar. Then, unexpectedly, the world opens. Before you lies a field, not of crops but of tents. Silk tents, draped in layers of violet, deep red, and silver. They shimmer in the moonlight like fallen pieces of a dream. This isn't a market, and it's not a camp. It's something else entirely. You've stumbled upon the spiral of tastes. A man in a tunic embroidered with gold suns greets you with a slow bow. He's holding a tray with two tiny cups. One holds a thick, dark paste that smells of walnut and clove. The other is filled with a pale golden liquid, fizzing lightly. Welcome, he says, to the spiral. Tonight, you'll eat emotions. You accept both cups, because of course you do. The paste is dense and grainy, dates perhaps, with crushed almond and saffron. It coats your tongue like a promise. The drink tastes of lemon, rosewater, and some shy spice that only reveals itself once you've swallowed. You follow the spiral. Each tent offers something different. In one, you're handed a spoonful of chilled love pudding, a classic Persian dish made with milk, sugar, rice flour, and enough rosewater to perfume a bathhouse. It's soft and faintly floral, like eating a well-written apology. A scroll beside it reads, "Serve this to the one who forgot your birthday." In another tent, the server is draped in emerald and velvet. She presents a tray of what she calls sukane ashik, or lover's speech, tiny candies that melt instantly on the tongue, leaving behind only spice and suggestion. One is laced with black pepper and honey, another with pomegranate and a whisper of vinegar. These are meant to stir conversation, she explains, or quiet it entirely. You take the one with ginger and rose salt. It sends a tiny fire along your gums. You feel like confessing something. You don't. Historians still argue, she says, whether any of this was real cuisine or just edible flirtation. But either way, it worked. Quirky fringe tidbit. A 14th century Sufi mystic wrote a guide to culinary alignment in which certain spices were assigned emotional frequencies. Cardamom brought clarity. Black cumin, seduction. Vinegar was meant to cut through doubt. The manuscript ends with a poem that includes the lines, "If your words cannot reach them, bake a question into bread." The spiral continues. You're handed a wafer-thin pastry filled with crushed pistachio and dried fig, wrapped in paper that crinkles like old secrets. A young man urges you to bite it in front of a mirror. You do. It tastes like something stolen. He nods approvingly. You pass a tent filled with laughter. Inside, guests are blindfolded, reaching for platters of candied violets and sugared almonds shaped like teardrops. No one speaks. They only taste and hum and sometimes giggle. The next tent contains a table draped in indigo with a single silver dish. On it sits a bowl of pale, quivering jelly that smells faintly of smoke and myrrh. "What's this?" you ask. The server tilts her head. It's made from quince and longing. You try it. She wasn't lying. Eventually, the tents thin out. The laughter fades. You reach the center of the spiral, where no tent stands, only a clearing beneath a canopy of jasmine vines and soft lamplight. There's one cushion, one table, and one dish, figs halved, roasted, and filled with warm goat cheese, honey, and crushed walnuts. You sit. The silence is complete yet full. You take a fig. It is warm in your hands, the skin lightly charred, the cheese just beginning to melt. The honey drips slowly, deliberately, like time refusing to hurry. You eat, and with it comes a wave of something deep and quiet, like remembering someone's touch before you even met them. A woman steps into the clearing. She doesn't speak. She simply sets down a folded piece of parchment, bows slightly, and disappears into the spiral. You unfold the paper. It reads, "Desire is not about having. It is about holding, briefly, lightly, like breath." You sit there, alone, with the taste of fig and memory on your tongue, and you let that idea settle. You've been fed rosewater and secrets, saffron and mischief, vinegar and longing. You've chewed on metaphors and swallowed moods. And now, here in this stillness, you understand. Aphrodisiacs are not potions or promises. They're stories we swallow to remember who we were before fear made us cautious. You rise slowly. The spiral has vanished, just like that. You stand in a moonlit grove of fig trees, alone, the night wrapped around you like silk. Your satchel is a little heavier, your senses quieter, sharper. You feel full, but not just from food, from feeling, from memory, from the gentle ache of wanting that has nowhere to go. You walk forward, not toward anything in particular, just onward. The fig still lingers. So does the parchment. So does the silence. The night air has changed again. As you step away from the spiral of silken tents, your footsteps fall into a rhythm more dreamlike than deliberate. Behind you, the flavors of pomegranate and pepper still linger faintly on your tongue, while ahead, the world narrows into something quieter, darker, softer, yet no less vivid. You walk, and the stars begin to multiply above you. That same crescent moon that hung over the fig grove still follows, but it seems more curious now. Less watcher, more companion. You take the smaller path at the fork, part trail, part suggestion, lined with gnarled camphor trees whose bark peels like old scrolls. Their scent, sharp, resinous, ancient, mixes with something damp and green. A little further along, the soft murmur of water reaches your ears. It sounds like someone whispering through velvet. You follow the sound, your satchel bouncing gently against your side. Inside it, the jar of mango pickle clicks lightly against the sealed vial of perfume, the folded parchment from the spiral of tastes, and that last sprig of basil wrapped in crimson thread. These aren't just souvenirs. They're parts of you now. You carry them like inherited memory. The trees open at last to reveal an old stone bridge, arched gently over a stream so clear the stars look brighter in its reflection than in the sky above. You step onto the bridge slowly, as if the stones beneath your feet might hum. The water babbles beneath, wrapping around mossy rocks and faded silver coins, tossed long ago by people who believed in luck, or maybe in love. You pause at the center of the bridge. The wind is still. The moon hangs directly overhead. Everything feels paused. Then you see her. An old woman sits cross-legged at the far edge of the bridge, her robes simple but layered in hues of ash and bone. She is placing smooth, flat river stones in a perfect circle before her, one by one, with a precision that feels both mundane and sacred. She doesn't look up, but she speaks. "You're late," she murmurs, not unkindly, but not too late. You approach, not sure what's expected. She gestures to a spot beside her. You sit. Without asking, you reach into your satchel and offer her the basil bundle. She takes it wordlessly, tucking it beside the circle of stones. Then she lights a tiny coil of incense and waves it gently, letting its smoke unfurl across the stones, your skin, the air between you. The scent is unmistakable. Basil, yes, but older somehow. Earthier. More like memory than herb. You inhale deeply and something stirs in your chest, not longing, not grief, but the space between them. She finally turns to look at you. "You've eaten many things," she says, "drank even more, chased flavors that made you sweat and dream and forget your own name." You nod, because she's right. "But what do you still carry?" she asks. You open your satchel and lay out your artifacts like cards in a deck. The parchment bearing the phrase, "Desire is not about having, it is about holding." The mango pickle sealed tight in its little jar of fire and vinegar, the vial of perfume you never opened, and now this circle of stones. The woman nods. "You've come to the end of the taste trail. There's nothing left to consume, only to release." She places one more stone into the circle, then offers you one. You take it. It's cool, smooth, and unexpectedly heavy. You feel your breath slow. Time stretches. She nods once, and you know what to do. You whisper something into the stone, something small, personal, unspoken. It could be a name, a memory, a regret, a wish. The stone accepts it. "Historians still argue," she says gently, "whether these rituals meant anything beyond metaphor, whether people ever really believed the smoke could carry emotion, whether basil could cleanse or fig awaken desire. But those who came here always left different than they arrived." She gestures toward the stream. You step forward, bend low, and place your stone in the water. It sinks slowly, not like a weight, but like a seed. The ripples stretch outward, silent and symmetrical, until they vanish beneath the moonlight. You return to her side. She's holding something now, a lupine blossom, pale blue and soft with dew. She places it in your hand. "For you," she says, "not to plant, not to press, just to carry." You cradle the flower. It's almost nothing, but it feels like everything. A breeze returns. The incense smoke twirls upward. The stream continues its endless song. You sit together in silence for a long while. She doesn't speak again. She doesn't need to. The night, the bridge, the moon. They say enough. Finally, you rise. She is already gone. You look out at the stream, the stones, the basil-sweetened smoke still clinging faintly to your sleeve. You walk back across the bridge, this time lighter. Not because you've lost anything, but because something heavy has been placed where it belongs, into the water, into the earth, into the ritual of letting go. You don't know what the flower means, or the stone, or the jar of mango pickle, still unopened. But you carry them all the same, because now you understand. An aphrodisiac is not a thing you eat. It's a story you taste, a memory you wear, a moment you share. You walk on into the softest part of the night, the air around you warm with breath, smoke, and the quiet heartbeat of something sacred. Dawn begins not with a sound, but with a sigh. Somewhere beyond the fig groves and the tents that vanished with the stars, the sky is tinting from deep velvet into something like rosewater. The moon has grown faint now, thin as a sliver of fingernail, and the first birds begin to call to each other across the still hills. You walk slowly, barefoot now, not because you lost your shoes, though you might have, but because the ground feels welcoming. The grass is cool with dew, the path packed and smooth beneath your soles. You're no longer walking toward anything, just through. Ahead, there's a stone bench nestled beneath a willow tree. Its surface is slightly cracked, softened by moss and the warm curve of time. You settle onto it with a quiet exhale, as if the weight you've carried has finally melted into the morning air. And for the first time, you take full stock of what's left in your satchel. First, the jar of mango pickle, still sealed, still intimidating in its spicy golden red confidence. You set it down beside you and roll it gently with your fingers. You think of the sisters, how they spoke of it like a weapon and a blessing. You thought it was just a garnish. Now you know it was a dare. Next, the tiny amber bottle of perfume, its wax seal unbroken, its contents still mysterious. You lift it close to your nose, trying to catch even the faintest trace. Nothing. It's waiting, just like you. A secret unopened. A version of you that never said the thing, never crossed the line, never tasted the fig. You smile and set it beside the pickle. Then the parchment, folded gently, worn now at the edges. The phrase written in elegant hand still clear. Desire is not about having, it is about holding, briefly, lightly, like breath. You've recited it silently so many times now it no longer feels like someone else's wisdom. It feels like yours. And finally, tucked inside that parchment, the lupine blossom. Pale blue, soft as breath, the old woman's parting gift. Still fragrant, still trembling slightly from the cool morning air. You hold it carefully in your palm. You'd expected it to wilt overnight, but here it is, intact. A symbol not of resilience, but of grace, quiet grace, held lightly. You line them up beside you on the stone bench. 4 objects, 4 tastes of the night. But they aren't just things, they're memory anchors. You close your eyes and inhale deeply. The air carries the last trace of basil-sweetened incense. Your fingertips smell faintly of saffron and smoke. You remember the first bite of that tangy date paste, the velvet echo of fig on your lips, the unexpected warmth of goat cheese, the laughter that followed, the silence that lingered after. You are full, not from eating, not exactly, from meaning. Historians still argue, you murmur to the wind, whether aphrodisiacs were ever real, whether goat brains and basil could awaken lust, whether lizard tonic stirred passion or just made people hallucinate. You open your eyes. The morning doesn't argue back. It simply listens. You pick up the perfume vial. You turn it in your hands. You could open it now. Let it reveal whatever it has been guarding. But you don't. Somehow it feels more intimate to leave it sealed, to let it remain possible. Desire, you understand now, isn't a thing to be solved or consumed. It's a door you choose to leave ajar. It's a recipe you don't quite finish, a flavor that lingers. The mango pickle, you tuck it back into your bag. Not to be eaten, not today, but to be remembered. A symbol of courage you didn't realize you had. The parchment, you fold it again, gently. You don't need to reread it. The words are yours now, etched not in ink but in rhythm. The lupine, you press it between 2 pages of your notebook, where its scent will fade slowly over time. A secret held, a goodbye whispered, and then you stand. The willow stirs above you. The sky has brightened now, no longer promise, but beginning. You don't feel changed in a dramatic way. You haven't been transformed into someone else. You haven't transcended or descended. You've simply returned with more. More patience, more memory, more softness in your step. As you begin walking again, birdsong rises. The earth feels warmer underfoot. The breeze feels like an old friend, brushing your cheek as if to say, "See? You made it through the night." And you did. Not just through a night of eating strange things or whispering forgotten spells, but through a journey of meaning stitched through with quiet rituals. Basil offered to fire. Saffron poured in silence, perfume sealed with restraint, longing folded into jam, secrets roasted in figs. This was never about food. It was about remembering what you once longed for and realizing you still can. You walk now not toward a destination, but as part of one. The mango pickle bumps gently in your bag. You laugh. You still don't know if it works, but that's the point. The path opens gently, like a breath held too long finally released. The grove behind you dissolves into distance, and ahead, there's nothing dramatic. No palace, no strange new village. Just open fields dappled with wildflowers and a sky soft as linen. You pass beneath a tree that hums with bees, their lazy rhythm somehow in sync with your own pulse. You are not rushing now. You haven't been for some time. The wind picks up ever so slightly, and the road rises before you in a slow, forgiving arc. At the top of the hill you stop, not because you're tired, but because something tells you to look back, and you do. What a strange collection of memories stretches behind you. A fig grove with secret lovers, a mango pickle powerful enough to disrupt bloodlines, perfumes never opened, basil burned beneath full moons, parchments written by hands older than names, goat brain stew, and of course, that lizard tonic whose effect you're still not entirely sure of. You smile, you sit. From your satchel, you retrieve the folded parchment once more. This time, you do reread it. The words have changed somehow, not in ink, but in weight. Desire is not about having, it is about holding, briefly, lightly, like breath. You say them aloud, a breeze stirs, as if the words were always meant to be spoken at the top of this hill, under this exact sky with these bees buzzing nearby. You close your eyes, and then you do something you didn't expect. You lie back in the grass, and you let yourself rest. For the first time, you don't need to go anywhere. There are no more flavors left to try, no more stories demanding to be chased. Everything you were meant to carry, you already do, in your body, in your breath, in your satchel. Yes, technically, but even more deeply, in your rhythms now. Basil smoke breath, pickled courage, figs like first kisses, rosewater longing. You let your fingers trail through the grass. There are ants here, carrying on without any thought of ancient recipes or poetic metaphors. And that's comforting too. The sky shifts toward blue, the kind of blue that carries the promise of tea, of warm bread, of gentle re-entry into the waking world. You think of the people you met, the sisters who argued with vinegar in their voices, the Sufi who saw meals as prayers, the man who claimed a train scent like a falcon, the woman with the spiral who gave you permission to taste emotions, the quiet elder who taught you how to release longing like stones into water, and you think they were never offering you power or magic or even answers. They were offering you awareness of flavor, of self, of the rituals we forget to honor. Quirky fringe tidbit: in one now lost manuscript on Persian dream theory, a scholar wrote that certain dreams only arrive after eating saffron before dawn. He cautioned that they might not be dreams at all, but memories misplaced from past lives, returning in flavor. You wonder what dreams tonight will bring. Perhaps none at all. Perhaps only stillness. You open your eyes again and look at the sky. A hawk circles high above, patient and slow. You follow its path until it fades into light. You reach into your satchel one last time, not for anything in particular, just to feel what remains, the fig-sweet warmth of what's been gathered. You realize something very small but very true. There is no aphrodisiac more powerful than presence. Not goat brains, not saffron, not fermented camel milk. Just this. Here now. You stand, you stretch, and for no particular reason you whisper, "Thank you." To the basil, to the stories, to the fig, to yourself. And you begin to walk again. No destination, just motion. Just the road, humming beneath your feet. The last part of the path is downhill, easy, sunlit, and wide. You follow it gently, no longer searching, just remembering, just returning. Let yourself soften now. Let your shoulders fall gently back into the surface beneath you, whether it's a mattress, a couch, or just a quiet breath waiting. There's nothing else to taste tonight. No more stories to unwrap. Just you and the slow, safe rhythm of sleep beginning to bloom. Inhale, hold it. Exhale softly. Feel your fingers loosen, your jaw go slack, your eyes heavier than before. Remember how the mango pickle waited, sealed in its tiny jar? You can be like that too, held, wrapped, content to rest in your own weight, in your own stillness. The stories you've heard tonight weren't meant to provoke or shock or even solve anything. They were simply flavors, soft and strange and sacred, meant to be tasted and then released like breath. Let them settle now. The basil smoke is gone. The rosewater has faded. The fig sweetness lingers only faintly, and that's enough. Let yourself drift backward into the arms of that quiet woman by the stream. Let the weight of a smooth stone anchor you. Let the sound of bees above olive trees become a lullaby. You are not alone. You are not unfinished. You are only unwinding. So rest now. Let the night cradle you. Let your breath grow slower. Let go of taste. Let go of longing. Let go of needing to know what happens next. Because you've already arrived. You're already home. Sweet dreams.